blockchain. Things are about to change. Open up the gates. Systems get replaced. Bitcoin, decentralize the trust. Security, transparency. The network's run by us. Bitcoin.
Welcome to the Bitcoin.com podcast. This is your host, Zach Doty, and we have Eric Voorhees on the show today from Shapeshift.io, here to tell us about how his exchange was just hacked by an insider. Eric, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
So tell us the story. For those who haven't already read your article, tell us what happened and how all this went down.
Okay, it's a bit of a long story. I'll try to sort of cover the important points. As I was writing it down, I thought it would be 3 or 4 pages, and it ended up becoming 14 or 15, and there was a lot of details I left out and stuff like that. But essentially, Shapeshift, which is the company I run, it's a digital asset exchange, so people can convert between Bitcoin and other blockchain assets like Ethereum and all the others. And essentially, about a month ago, on March 14th, I got a call from one of the guys on my team, basically saying we had 315 Bitcoin leave the hot wallet this morning. We have no idea what happened. So we all rushed into the office, started trying to figure out what was going on. And our head IT guy, who we'll call Bob, not his real name, he arrived a little late and basically was acting a little strange. But during the investigation, during the day, not only did he take a hour-long lunch break in the middle of the investigation and walk off to go feed himself, but after he got back, I was on a call in the other room. He was sitting down with 2 of the other guys looking through stuff. And the other 2 guys saw him in the logs in real time deleting a key file of his SSH keys. And it was those exact keys which had logged into the hot wallet server that morning and logged out. And just the logging in and logging out of those keys wasn't necessarily something nefarious because he was our server admin after all. But he deleted those keys from the file during the investigation. And immediately after doing that, he claimed to get a call from his mother who needed to be taken to the hospital, allegedly. And so he leaves for the second time during the day, and I come out from my call, and the guys tell me what they saw in the logs. And so immediately we realized that, okay, he was the one that did it. He was the one that took this Bitcoin. And so that was a whole big mess a month ago. We had pursued a civil case and a criminal case against him, and we were dealing with all of that, which takes a while. And we thought basically it was sort of case closed, like, we'll get him and maybe we'll be able to get some or all of the funds back since we have proof of his crime. And then we for a few weeks we worked to get the site set up on a totally new infrastructure, because since he was our server guy, we assumed everything he had been touching was compromised on some level. We get our new infrastructure ready, and basically the day that we were going to launch, or the day before we were going to launch the site on that new infrastructure, a bunch of Ethereum leaves the hot wallet, and then a bunch of Bitcoin, and then a bunch of Litecoin, all from the new server, from wallets that had not been live or public facing, were brand new, only the keys created only on that new server, weeks after the guy was gone. And we started freaking out again and trying to figure out what happened. Couldn't figure out much, but we tracked some of the Litecoin to an exchange. We got information of the account holder, and I emailed the email address that was on that account, not expecting really to hear back. But the next day, so that hack was on the 7th of April, a couple of weeks ago. The next day, we were yet again putting everything up on new infrastructure, wholly new keys and everything. And during the middle of the day, the hacker from the 7th responds to me in email and basically mentions Bob's name, because I had asked him, like I said, nice hack, how'd you do it? And he wrote back just saying, Bob's name. And so then at first we thought, okay, is Bob the hacker again? And then realized probably the more likely explanation was that he sold or gave away a bunch of our information. And we then, went up the next day on the 3rd infrastructure, and that got hacked too. We had both Bitcoin and Ethereum leave that. So at that point, we were very confused. It did not seem possible for that to happen. We called in some expert forensic investigators and basically spent the next week just going into crazy paranoid security mode, not only rebuilding on new infrastructure, but re-architecting a lot of the pieces to be, as bulletproof as possible, which takes a long time and a lot of resources and is very stressful when your site's down and all your customers are sitting there waiting. But during that time, I had a couple chats with the hacker, and he revealed some of the details about what happened. Basically, that he had contacted Bob after learning of the first breach and bought information, offered to Bob Bitcoin for information on how to breach the system. And Bob gave him a bunch of private details about our infrastructure, things that only he would know that would make it vastly easier. And above and beyond those, he had installed a remote access terminal on at least one of the machines. And so the hacker was able to basically tunnel through that. And that's how he was able to breach the servers both on the 7th of April and 2 days later on the 9th. So it was not just a single theft back in March, but a complete betrayal of every code of ethics and contract and decency that one could do. It caused huge losses for us, tons of time lost and stress and headache, and it's been a nightmare, but we got the site back up a couple days ago and continuing to hunt down Bob and bring him to justice at this point.
And the amazing thing here is that none of your customers' funds were lost, and it's a good example to the rest of the community how to not put your customers' funds at risk.
Yeah, we built Shapeshift from the beginning as a new model in which exchange could happen without holding customer money. And to me, that was very important, both for financial liability reasons and also from a regulatory perspective. And it was always very theoretical, we've built it this way, so customers can't lose money. Isn't that great? But when it actually happens, when a hack happens, and not just a hack from some outsider, but a real true breach from an insider who had access to many things, which is the most destructive and dangerous situation. Even in that situation, no customers lost any money, nor could they have. So while the whole thing was a huge nightmare, that it was a huge relief that we had structured it that way and built it that way. And I definitely think that it can be used as a model or example for others in the industry to show that, it's impossible to avoid security issues, but customer money should never be at risk. And with Bitcoin and blockchain technologies, you can build things that prevent that from happening.
And your damages in this whole hack were around $250,000. Is that the estimate?
A little less than that. So we'll see what of that. I mean, that's just direct funds taken, and there's a huge amount of time and resources spent in the cleanup.
And was Bob the main server admin? Was he the one that had the most access to everything?
Yeah, we had brought him on because we brought him on 6 months prior because we knew that as the company was growing, we needed to really professionalize our server infrastructure, make it both more secure and more scalable. And so we brought him on, for that purpose. So there's a good dose of irony in all this, of course. So not only did he not, do any productive work to make things better, but he actually became the biggest threat. So in hindsight, it would have been better to just continue on without hiring for that position at that time.
Yeah, and it seemed like, some of the things he said were laughable, like looking at the IP address on the blockchain.info explorer, and his line wasn't that good either.
Yeah, I mean, we come to the conclusion that he knew enough about servers to basically, bullshit and basically trick people who were not experts in that he knew what he was talking about. And as the whole calamity unfolded, we came to realize the extent of his deception, not least of which when he was saying ridiculous things like that. And when the example you're referencing is when on the day of the first hack in March, and he came in and started pointing at possible explanations for what happened, none of which made any sense at all, and which weren't even plausible or feasible, and just made him sound very either completely stupid and incompetent or like he was covering something up. And I think at this point we have come to learn that both of those were true.
And how long was Bob with you before this happened? Do you think he had this idea going into the employment with you?
He was with us about 6 or 7 months total, half as sort of contractor, half as employee. I don't know. I don't know what his intentions were. I mean, maybe he joined knowing that he would totally screw us over when he got the opportunity to. Maybe he didn't plan on that from the beginning, but he's just a bad person, and whenever an opportunity to hurt people and take their stuff arises, he grabs it. I don't know. But what we do know is that there is a big degree of premeditation because he installed that backdoor, that remote access on one of our computers. That happened obviously before the day of the hack, when when we let him go. It would have had to happen before that. So he had planned something. Maybe all that'll come out in court.
And is there any news as to whether he's been apprehended or whether is there any kind of leads?
We have leads. I probably won't share them on this podcast for obvious reasons. But yeah, I mean he fled. He left his dog in his apartment and I guess told his neighbor to feed him for a couple weeks, or asked the neighbor to do that. And the neighbor hasn't heard from him now in 4 or 5 weeks and has no idea what's going on. And the dog has just been left there, abandoned. Yeah, I mean, he's a scumbag.
Yeah. It seems probable that Bob will be apprehended, and we hope that happens soon. What about Rovion? Any leads there, or is that's a harder one to track down, isn't it?
Yes, Rovion's the name of the hacker who bought the information from Bob and who conveyed a lot of things to us. Yeah, we don't know much about him. We have some information, but again, I won't share that on the podcast. We could tell that Rovion was more sophisticated than Bob. Rovion seemed like he knew what he was doing. He wasn't a fool, at least. And I mean, we'll see.
Any bounty for the community if there's somebody out there who tracks him down?
I mean, if someone tracks him down, they should definitely speak with me. We haven't decided whether to put up bounties or release more information that would lead to either of these people. We're still trying to decide that, and that's sort of an open-ended question. But definitely, if people read the story and you know, there is some real information in there, like some real specifics of Bitcoin and Ethereum addresses involved, and some email addresses and things like that. So I know there's some pretty smart investigators in the community, and definitely if someone learns things that would be useful to us, they should reach out to me.
Yeah, good idea. And anybody out there who has any blockchain analysis, clustering analysis tools, take a look at those addresses. I know the guys from Elliptic are working on stuff like that. Maybe I'll shoot them a message and see if they have any ideas.
Yeah, the funds that Bob took on March 14th are still in the address that he sent it to. So those haven't moved in a month. Those are still there. And at this point, everyone's obviously watching that address very closely. And Rovion has moved a lot of his funds around. A lot of it's trackable. We actually caught some of the funds he was trying to escape with. So we retrieved a little bit of the money back, but it was a minority. Of course, a great part of the story was when Rovion came back to me and asked if I would exchange some of the Ethereum that he had stolen for Bitcoin, because he had been sending Ethereum to exchanges and it was getting frozen. And so he came back to me and asked if I would exchange for him. And I said, sure, we can do that, but I need some information, and that was what led to many of the details.
An incredible plot there, right? And there's no loyalty between thieves. These guys, they do a deal and then they immediately get betrayed by each other.
Even Rovion was pretty disgusted with Bob, and he said to me when we were exchanging information that after we were done that he didn't want any more communication between us. And then later, sort of at the end of the conversation, he said, so I know I said no more communication, but I would appreciate if you send me a message after Bob is apprehended, because it's pretty shitty to steal from your own employer.
So I wanted to say, as far as Shapeshift, I know you guys had to re-architect. Are you planning to move forward on anything? Do you have anything new you kind of want to let the community know about? I know this is a setback, but obviously you're just going to push forward and keep, developing new things for your platform.
Yeah, I mean, all I know how to do is build stuff, and so what doesn't kill us will just, teach us lessons, and we adapt and build differently and build better. So, a lot of the, behind-the-scenes architecture of how our servers are set up is vastly superior now, and it's hard because it's the kind of thing where, when you start a business and it's small and you don't know if the market will like it at all yet, and it's all just theory, and you have all these immense challenges and questions ahead of you. When you ask, should I spend $100,000 or $200,000 to really learn how to do the servers in the absolute best way, to pay like serious experts to help you with that? it's a hard question to know when the right time to do that is. I mean, you can't do it right away. It would be very foolish and a terrible use of money to overprotect yourself. And so a lot of people have this idea that you should just spend whatever it takes on security, but you can't. All we can do now is try to make another assessment of that and do it better now.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat with a hot wallet that I'm trying to run now. So what are the lessons in terms of hot wallet security and the amount? There's quite a bit of money there. Were you going through that every few hours with Shapeshift?
Yeah, like when we started, very little was needed in the hot wallets, and so even if they got breached and stolen completely, it wouldn't even really be that big of a deal. But over time, over a year and a half, as you grow, it's hard to pick the point where suddenly you've gone from securing a negligible amount to securing something that is serious. And that was that's my fault for not understanding that we had made that transition and to change some of our procedures. But at the point of the first hack in March, we had in that Bitcoin hot wallet over 300 Bitcoin in there, and that was not there just because we were lazy. That was there because the volume of the exchange volumes that we were processing required that amount at least to be running smoothly, and even with that amount was requiring lots of manual balancing and watching over the system and making sure all the different coins were in the right places at the right times. So yeah, I mean, it was, if it had happened a month or two prior, we would have had probably 20 or 25% as much in the wallet. But it just crept up on us, and as we're sitting there trying to deal with the growth and the bubble in Ethereum caused us to be growing at like 100% a month for 3 months in a row, and while we were trying to just survive and make sure that the customers could be served quickly, this happens.
Well, this definitely has earned you respect, with the way that you've handled this, the transparency, the way that you've shown your resilience in terms of not having customer funds at risk. And I think this is going to, honestly, lead to a lot more trust from the whole community going forward. I know I would trust your service completely.
I have been very encouraged and inspired by all the kind responses that we received as this news was coming out about what happened to us. People were very supportive, and we had a lot of customers come to us and say how much they appreciated our service and that they'd be back as soon as we were back online. And that was immensely helpful during what's for sure our darkest period in Shapeshift's history. So to any of those people who are listening, thank you very much. Those words helped a lot. And so while it's nice to hear that people feel like they can trust us even more after this transparency, that's great. But more importantly than that, should be the example that you don't have to trust us. That the architecture of the service is done in such a way that that even if every employee in the company turned evil and shut down and ran off, customer funds are not at risk.
So the real story here, Eric, is no consumers had their money lost, and really the biggest story here is no consumers had their identities stolen. I think that's what should be focused on in this, is that you actually the hero protecting.
So when like the BitLicense in New York came out, and when we put up pleaseprotectconsumers.org, it was our response to the BitLicense, and we dropped service in New York because the BitLicense it was the first state in the U.S. that basically legislated the requirement for a large portion of blockchain companies to gather private personal information on their users, even if they don't need it for the operations of the business. And they do that because this is New York. I mean, they're used to regulating banks. Everything that they see looks like a bank to them, and they feel like, oh well, a Bitcoin company, since Bitcoin can be used as money sometimes, that means it's a bank and should be following all the same rules as a bank. And it's just so myopic and short-sighted. If we had stayed in New York and applied for the BitLicense, which itself would have been, a large six-figure ordeal, we would have to gather private information on all the people who used our service. And when when Bob sold all this information to the hacker, you can be damn sure he probably would have gotten more information if he could sell a whole treasure trove of private client data, personal information of all our users.
The story would just be
and we didn't have it.
Would be continuing
Yeah.
of all of these consumers' accounts for months on, years on in the future.
Yeah, and so this whole justification for much of the regulation comes into consumer protection, and it's bullshit. It endangers the regulation itself endangers people by pulling in private personal information for activities which don't require it. To operate Shapeshift doesn't require any of that. So why should we have to take private details about a person? It just exposes them. And I'm hopeful that people in the industry see this case as an example, not only of protecting people financially by design, but protecting their information and their livelihoods and their private identities by design.
Absolutely. I think that's the real story here. And, to contrast this as well with the legacy banking systems, I just read, a month ago about the Federal Reserve Bank of New York being hacked by, I don't know where the hackers were, but they stole $100 million. And that's the custodial model. I don't even know what the Federal Reserve is custodial of. Certainly not backed by gold anymore, but $100 million hack. And so the legacy financial system is by no means more secure, but it's a flawed design, and you're showing the way you really are pioneering this whole idea of non-custodial exchange. You actually are the pioneer of this whole concept, and I think the first exchange to do anything of this nature.
Yeah, what started sort of as like a little hobby project where I was like, oh, I wish it was easier to buy these coins, has turned into this realization that people shouldn't need to hold money at an exchange. Fiat, obviously, that will have to happen because fiat sucks and it has to be in a bank at some point in the chain. But blockchain assets, their whole magic is that they can be held by the user themselves. They have full possession and control and ownership. And with that mechanism, you don't need to hold funds, or it happens, information.
Securing your servers now. What do those who also manage hot wallets need to know about security? Because there are several groups of people that are running hot wallets. There are those who know it all and they run the server themselves, and they're the only ones that have access. And then there's the other group of people that they're focused on the business and they have a team of employees, and it's something they just delegate. And it's a scary thing to delegate. I'm in the position of setting up a hot wallet soon with only company funds, no customer funds, and there's a lot to securing a hot wallet. So what are you learning as the best practices going forward for that?
Well, probably the most important lesson from our incident was we didn't get breached by some outsider who figured out a vulnerability. We got breached by an insider who we trusted. So our vulnerability was not setting up a wallet poorly, although there are things we could have done to make it even safer. That wasn't the attack vector. The attack vector was having someone in the team who was fundamentally an evil person. That social aspect of protecting funds and protecting companies is probably not as appreciated as it should be. I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that most hacks generally are by insiders on some level or another. This is true kind of broadly in society, and people fear outsiders and the other people more than they fear those close to them. And usually it's the ones close to you who are the bigger threat. And that's just sort of a psychological thing that people have to wake up to and adapt with.
Yeah, so for those who are running companies that have hot wallets, maybe consider having that person that has the hot wallet control of that server at the server admin, have them put up some kind of a bond, some kind of an escrow.
Yeah.
Or if the proprietor can learn what's involved with hardening the server and starting up the services and getting things running, that works as well.
Another simple thing is just Bob seems to have installed the remote desktop client on someone's computer when it was just sitting there open, and so it seems like super overly paranoid to just lock your screen whenever you walk away from your computer, especially when you're in a place with friends or with people that you trust. That seems, tin hat superstitious almost. But in our case, it would have saved us $100,000
or more,
and a lot of time and headache.
So we're through this, and you've come out with more secure servers. Obviously, a large loss, but I think hopefully some of that will be made right over time. I don't know if Bob has any assets that could get.
Well, he has at least 315 Bitcoin.
Other than that the courts could I guess the courts could get access to that if they were persuasive enough.
Yeah, it's been rough. It's been one of life's learning experiences. I've discovered a lot of times in life that things that are really bad can turn into good things over time if you react to them properly. So, if I look back 5 years from now to today, maybe this was the thing that really made us professionalize a lot of our systems, so that as we grow bigger, we can really support a much larger enterprise level business. Hopefully the industry learns. Hopefully people learn a little bit more about just human interaction when it comes to running businesses where you're essentially protecting digital gold. And each time these hacks happen, if people can see what was breached and in what way, everyone can improve and the industry can get healthier.
So I wonder, do you have plans to sort of work with your team, or a new vetting process, or sort of like maybe some security seminars just for the basics? Like you said, it can be an inside job. So as far as server security, it sounds like you've improved it, but do you have any plans and any advice for people of how to really get to know your team and make sure everyone's on the same page, and maybe just educate them so you can avoid these kind of issues in the future?
Yeah, I mean, one easy thing is to do background checks on everyone. That's a good one. And also to make sure that things are compartmentalized such that if an employee does something bad, that it is very clear that it was them. So every key that they have is only for them. Every user account that they have is only for them. Everything they access, it's very clear when and how they accessed it, so that nothing can be ambiguous. That's all very good. So that doesn't necessarily stop a theft, but it means that if it happens, much better details about how it happened and what exactly occurred. And just knowing that may be a deterrent to people.
Well, Eric, sounds like you're back up and running, site's up and working. So, it's good to have that service back online, and we hope that it stays up, and we hope that it's a smooth road from now on. But as you said, it's never a dull day in Bitcoin land.
Yeah, I guarantee it won't be a smooth road. That doesn't exist on the frontier of Bitcoin. But you learn and you build and you just get through it. And Bitcoin is an ongoing struggle of the entire industry against a very entrenched legacy system. So I expect these kind of battles. I expect things to be hard and difficult as this industry grows. And again, to all the people who reached out to us and said nice things and offered to help, I really appreciate it.
Well, you have the support of the community, and there's no other exchange which I have seen be hacked and be this transparent, this open about the whole thing throughout the process. So that's kudos to you on that, and I will continue to use your service and recommend it. In fact, it's the only exchange that I'll recommend. Well, thank you so much, Eric, for coming on the podcast. Again, this is the Bitcoin.com podcast, bitcoin.com/podcast, and today's episode was with Eric Voorhees from Shapeshift and Gavin Knight. Kudos to you, Eric, for protecting your consumers' identities, for protecting their funds, and good job getting Rovian to spill the beans on Bob, and we hope that both of them are apprehended soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
Welcome to my chain.